Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. You know it's been a decent Spurs weekend when you can't get that song Free From Desire out of your head. Honestly, I've been absolutely annoying the family this morning, just going around going na, 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 just constantly over and over again. I can't even help myself. It is now just synonymous, isn't it, with something exciting or just good happening at Tottenham right now. Pump it out the speakers. Players and fans go mad together. That whole South Stand is rocking. Yeah, you know it's a good weekend when that song's stuck in your head. And do you know what? It's something about that South Stand. That South Stand, that 17,500 seater South Stand that backs onto Park Lane, it just seems to... Good things seem to happen in front of it. Previous seasons as well, but even this season alone, I mean, we've had... last gasp goals against Sheffield United, Liverpool, now Brighton as well. Everything seems to happen in front of that. It just seems to suck the football into the goal, which I guess is the whole point in it, isn't it? It's supposed to, not that it doesn't obviously physically suck the football into the goal, but just to have that noise and that support and just, I guess it's like a bigger version of like what the Kop has always been for Anfield, I suppose. It's this thing that just creates a symbol for that stadium, and the Spurs players adore it. The fans who sit in it love it. You know, I was speaking to some people that were sat right in like a couple of the front rows in the South Stand yesterday, and they just said it's just amazing. Just the feeling and the vibration of the noise. I mean, that's the whole way it was designed to just boom out. And yeah, to be able to see that goal in those final moments, all like Son, Richarlison, Maddison, all linking up together. It's a lovely move. It was, after a lot of the game where we were kind of struggling to see some of the Postecoglou football, it was the perfect Postecoglou move that won the game. You know, Son and I think Son put it back to Maddison. Maddison knocked it onto Richarlison. Richarlison knocked it through to Son. Son plays an absolutely world-class ball. The more I've seen it from different angles, you realise the degree of difficulty, and that's the beauty of Son. He makes the difficult look simple. And I just kind of saw it. I thought, oh, he slung it across the box. So that's perfect. But then when you look at it, you think there was no kind of parameters for being wrong. A millimetre either side, and the defender cuts out, the keeper gets it, anything. He just puts it on kind of just the perfect place for Brennan Johnson, and who was admitted afterwards, he was very nervous as that ball was coming across, as he would be. You know, a guy that's, well, we'll talk about Brennan Johnson in a bit. But yeah, to see him slam that ball home, it was an incredible moment, and you know, and hopefully one of many that we're going to continue to get in the Postecoglou era. Because again, another thing we're going to chat about over the course of this video is those late goals and the reason they come and why that's what he pushes for in every single game. And yes, you're going to get the odd moment like last week at Goodison Park where we're talking about a late goal that was incredibly disappointing. But then you're going to get more moments like yesterday that just lift everyone, and it's so weird. You know, your 3-0 wins, of course, the 3-0, 3-1s, whatever, are so much more comfortable, and you get the sense of dominance, things like that. But there's just something weird about a late goal that just galvanises everyone. And I think how important it was that it was done in the Postecoglou way, because I think those players go away now having had a bit of a kind of a talking to at half-time, to put it mildly, from Postecoglou. And then what's happened is they've responded in those dying moments when some of them would have been on their, knees in terms of tiredness, and they've responded with exactly what he's asked them to do, and it's worked. It's like the lesson is there for them to see, and we, you've heard of the four tops. We got the older viewers might have. We got the four sons. Maddison, Richarlison, Son, and Johnson. That sounded so crowbarred in. But you know what I mean. It was an incredible moment. It was fantastic. Even as a journalist, knowing that I have to rewrite a lot of my stuff, very happy to do it when it's a goal like that. That's absolutely fine. The celebrations were just madness. It was a big crowd as well. 61,445 inside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, including Dele Alli, who was sat just behind us. Behind the press box, in a box. I don't know if it was... I don't think it was Maddison's box. I think Maddison's is a couple further along. because I've seen like Luke Littler in there before, the darts player. I feel like it was maybe just one on from that. It was one that maybe used to be Eric Dyer's box. I can't remember. Certainly, it's the same box I've seen Fabio Paratici in. So whether it's one that someone at the club has, or I don't know. But it was great to see him there. He was getting lots of attention from the fans, and obviously responding in kind. Lots of photos being taken, which a lot of the media were a bit like, oh, this is kind of like, what's happening, until they realised that there was actually someone famous behind us. But great to see him there, and he, looked well. Hopefully he'll be back playing football sooner rather than later. But yeah, he'd have been among those that would have erupted at that late goal. Just watching it all playing out in front of us was incredible. We had the Brighton players obviously just falling to the floor in like dismay. I mean, funnily enough, one of the calmest people there was Brennan Johnson. As he scored, he kind of went off on this like almost like kind of run. It was like, yeah, I've done it. Whereas many players in that situation would have run off screaming. I mean, I looked at the ball boy, even sat just in front of him, was like pumping his fists and everything. He was going mad. He was loving being in that moment. And then you watch them all kind of coming over. Richarlison, I think, was the first one over to him, like grabbed him by the neck. Højbjerg was another one that he kind of did this weird, almost knee slide, kind of, it almost looked like, some of the photos make it look like he's proposing to him or just saluting him. It's fantastic. And then you had subs, some of the subs that hadn't even come on, some that had gone off. Sarr, Bentancur, Doggy, Radu Dragishin sprinted the length, or the half the length of the pitch from the dugout as well to get involved, which I thought, that's a really nice thing. I love the fact that he was that involved in it. He was clearly feels that part of the club, feels part of the family, I guess. That even though he hasn't been able to be involved as much as he would have liked to have been, he's part of that group. And he sprinted there. Pape Matar Sarr just jumped on top of everyone. Pape Matar Sarr was superb yesterday. Destiny Doggy had an ice pack on his knee. He came off a little bit towards the end of the game. Postecoglou didn't seem too concerned about it, but obviously it's Spurs, so we'll wait to see what that is. But yeah, he was down for a little bit. I think he was injured by Romero. I haven't watched that bit back, but I remember at the time feeling that Romero went in for a challenge and caught in the box Doggy as well. He literally wiped everyone out and the ball. Or did he actually? Maybe he didn't even get the ball or the Brighton man and just took a Doggy out. Like I say, I haven't watched it back, but yeah. So Doggy was at a bit of a whack. Bissouma got in there pretty quick as well. And there was like a nice little moment as well. Obviously, everyone else came over as well, like Sonny, who'd obviously been the architect of it all. But there was a little nice moment when Romero got over there after a lot of the other people, because I think he'd been celebrating. He'd obviously been at the other end of the pitch. Mickey van der Ven sprinted again, the fastest player in Premier League history, we now know. But Romero got there at the end, and he just gave Johnson this really, really tight squeeze of a hug. Said stuff into his ear, you could see. And then he kind of ruffled his hair in that kind of classic, loving big brother style. Honestly, Romero, I've got some quotes from him towards the end of this that I'll kind of share with you, that he did an interview with Sky Sports this week. That guy is turning into a leader. He is. Yes, he'll still have his impulsive moments, but in terms of the way he communicates with the other players, and I keep hearing this, and actually Postecoglou said it as well in his press conference, he is becoming a proper leader behind the scenes. He's realising what he is. He's a World Cup winner. He is one of the best players at the club. And he has the potential to be one, if not, well, certainly one of the best defenders in the world. So I like that side of his game is maturing and growing as well. And yeah, whatever he said, hopefully or seemingly was very much the words of a leader. Who else do we have? James Maddison was just knackered. He just sank to the floor on his knees. It was like platoon style, Willem Dafoe style. Vicario did a sprint and incredible knee slide, which you'd be proud of at the other end of the pitch if he'd scored the goal. Then we had further celebrations when the final whistle went, involving Vicario and Romero, which is mad. Honestly, Vicario he's a passionate guy, as we know Romero is, and they gripped each other. Vicario, you hopefully will have seen it by now. Vicario grabs Romero by his shirt collar, and he's yanking it up and down so much that it's going into Romero's mouth. It's an incredible moment of passion. At the same time, Romero is grabbing Vicario's shirt by kind of like the waist area by the sides, pulling that up and down, and then he kind of ends up like whacking his head down in like I say, Romero kind of big brother, overly friendly kind of style, and it's just the passion and I guess knowing what it means to them, what it means to the fans, and what it means, I think, to the journey they're on when they show the character to come back in games like this, especially like I say after last week having conceded a late goal to score at the other end in those final moments as well. It was superb, and actually with Brennan Johnson's goal, Brennan Johnson's celebration. I mean, he ended it by doing something with his hands. I'm not even going to reproduce it. It was some kind of weird thing. And actually, the Brighton fans, I think maybe some Spurs fans have got it wrong as well, thought he was having a bit of a dig at João Pedro's celebration that he did after his goals in the reverse fixture at the Amex. But actually, it wasn't. Johnson admitted it, explained it afterwards. He's a massive fan of the wrestler Jeff Hardy, and apparently that's something he did. I looked up some photos to see it all, and it's the thing he does with his hands. So that was his little nod to him. So yeah, for a team that's very much in its kind of formative stages, a very, very young team, these are the moments I think that just make them even stronger and forge that bond between them and the fans as well, even more so. And like I say, doing it in the manner of exactly how Postecoglou wanted and predicted the day before when talking about late goals and always going until the end of games trying to score rather than sit back. It was all very fitting. It was. Maddison spoke after the game. I did a little Spurs play interview, and he said about the late goals, we seem to do that a lot, don't we? I'm dying for a comfortable 3-0 win, but there's a beauty to winning late and scoring goals at the death like that. Having to show real character and mentality to keep going at the end of games like that. It was a wonderful feeling. Brighton are a really good team, a well-drilled team. When you're out there sometimes and you play at this level against teams like that, you can really feel that you're up against a well-drilled team and they're well-coached and they've got a good system and they're all on the same wavelength. That's why they cause teams problems and why they're knocking on the door of the Big Six for a couple of years now, not just as a one-off. We knew it was going to be tough. In the second half, we were a lot better once we'd figure out the build-up. They press man-to-man all over the pitch and leave a lot of space in behind. But if you can't get the half a yard from the man who's on the ball to play the pass with quality, then you can struggle. And I think we found that early on. We kept going, and the winning goal was a really nice goal. It was a really good move from the build-up all the way, exactly how the gaffer wants us to play. So I think he'll be happy with that one. And he went on. The gaffer is always going on about how he wants the other winger at the back post, and it's absolutely brilliant cross from Sonny. Brennan is listening and learning and taking on what the gaffer wants him to do, and he's scored a couple at the back stick now, so fair play to him. And then he said about his celebration, I couldn't actually make it to the celebrations. My legs were too goosed. I had to just fall on the floor and celebrate. That stand, though, that stand. The whole stadium was brilliant today and pushed us on all the way, but that is a special stand. That goal, all the late goals seem to come at that end. So big thank you to the fans as well today because they keep us going. You don't realise sometimes that when you're in one of those games when you're thinking, could it be one of those days when maybe you don't push for that winner, but they keep us going. And that little 1% does help. So thank you. He speaks so well, Maddison. I don't know whether he'll end up being a manager or not afterwards, but I can imagine him being a really good pundit. He's very interesting insights into the game whenever he speaks, and he's absolutely spot on about Brighton. I thought Brighton, I think they are just such a good team. They play lovely football. We've gone on about them before, and many pundits have, but when you kind of see it up close, and especially those patterns of play, they just move the ball around so well, and they know exactly where the next kind of person's going to be whenever they're going to play the ball. And actually, De Zerbi wasn't even there yesterday. The touchline ban, but also he wasn't even in the country. I think he'd been having some kind of dental surgery. I can't remember what it was back in Italy. So he wasn't even there. Although there were some suggestions, might have been as his assistant manager said, that he was actually calling the substitutions in the second half, like doing it via some kind of communications device. I presume they're allowed to do that as long as they're not on the touchline. But the key thing with Brighton for me is that over Spurs is that they're a year down the line. De Zerbi's been there a year or so longer than Postecoglou, and maybe just as importantly, he was building on the foundations of a similar-minded coach, who's taken over from Graham Potter and kind of building on those foundations. Although I know he doesn't particularly like that, apparently, when you say it, but it's true. It wasn't a world away from the football they were playing, whereas Postecoglou's come in, and he's only been there 6 months, and he's building on top it's not really building on top. He's starting from scratch. You know, the Conte style of football was very different. The Nuno style of football was very different. Jose Mourinho style was very different. There were elements of Pochettino football, but that was so far in the past that, you know, he was pretty much building from scratch. So I think you're going to have moments of a game like that against a very well-drilled coach team. You are going to struggle. And from the outside, it looks... it's frustrating, and you can kind of see little bits and pieces where you think, oh, you should have done that better, should have done that better. But ultimately, you know, you've got a team like Brighton to play the way they do, and they've got quality like Mitoma's just superb. Every time they kept pinging that diagonal ball to him, and he would control it as if he was just catching it in his hands. It was just incredible the way he plays. A player that Postecoglou tried to sign, I remember him saying as well, and he shared a good little kind of hug and a chat with him after the game as well. And I don't know. I'm sure he wasn't saying come to Tottenham, but he's a wonderful player. I mean, looking at the stats, you can see it in the stats. It was a lot closer than the home games are. 52% was all Spurs had in comparison to normally they're up in the 60s, sometimes 70s. They only had 445 passes to Brighton's 391. Again, normally there's 100 or 2 in that. 100 or 200 difference in those stats with most teams coming there. There were a disparity on the shots. 16 Spurs had to Brighton's 6. 6 of those on target. Brighton's only 3. And I would say that Vicario, after Pascal Gross's early penalty, didn't have that much to do. That's true. I think it was just the threat that Brighton were constantly providing without maybe breaking through. And maybe that's always been something levelled against Brighton, that perhaps having that centre forward that is going to get you a lot of goals. Welbeck's a good centre forward and he does cause problems, as evidenced by the penalty, but he's not going to be your 20-25 goal a season man. But yeah, they're a good team. They're a good team. But Spurs found a way through, and that's kind of all that matters in the end. Yes, you're going to have kind of clunky, inconsistent matches with a very young team who are very early in their, growth, I guess. But the key is, can they find a way through? And like I said, Postecoglou football found a way through, and that's a massive thing for them. It really is. And also, with Sarr's goal as well, Spurs have got the joint second longest scoring streak in Premier League history. They've now scored in 36 consecutive matches. So that's... I forgot how many league matches they've had under. Is it 24 under Postecoglou? I've got it right here. It is 24. So 24 of those for Postecoglou's era, and then the rest in Conte's time as well. So they got there. They got there. But do you know what? Postecoglou was not happy. He was not. He was obviously happy with the result. I could just tell when he comes into a press conference, you can kind of tell sometimes how he is. Like, we've had some pre-match ones, especially recently, where he's come in very jovial and you know he's in a really good mood. Whereas yesterday, came into the press conference room underneath in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and he was, he was a guy that was clearly happy about the result. Well, I think the way I termed the question, I'd start the presser, and the way I phrased it, I think kind of captured how I felt he was going to be. And I said, obviously very happy with the result, but what did you make of the performance, to kind of give him that outlet to get it off his chest? And he went in some good answers. What I would say, I'm going to use his answer to Spurs play, because I actually felt that was probably an even better answer, which is fine. I don't mind not getting the best answer. He was asked what he liked and didn't like about the match. Ben asked him that from Spurs play, and he said, there was a lot I didn't enjoy today. We were really poor first half. Some of that was Brighton are a good side and they're very disciplined and well coached, and we lacked some of those things. We lacked a real discipline. We took some liberties with and without the ball. It was really disappointing. Second half was better. We had a good response. When you chase the game, you're always going to be susceptible to counter-attacks, but for the most part, I thought we handled it okay, which they did. The defending was a lot better second half. I think we probably just edged it in the end and deserved the points, but it's plenty to work on. And the follow-up question he was asked about, is it a shame, almost in a way, that with now a week between each games, when you've had a big result like that with a last gasp goal, is it a shame that you haven't got the momentum that you can take straight in a few days later into the next game, or is it better to have the week of training work on the Hotspur Way pitches and he was very much took the latter. He said it's fair to say that after that first half we need a week. We need to do some work, and having a week with the boys will be good for us. I really like that. I like the fact that they just come away with a massive 3 points, kind of 2 of them grabbed at the death, and he's still just really peeved that they didn't play in the way they are meant to play. And that will kind of serve them well, because they'll learn from that, and they'll know that they had the character and belief, and that Postecoglou football brought the result. And I think you'll see first half against Wolves, them putting that into practice in the first half and really kind of going for it from the off. And sometimes you just need those little reminders. What he did have clearly that eventually helped was having probably the strongest bench that he's had while at Spurs. I mean, he was always going to turn to it at some point, because we said this before, and the Postecoglou way of football, it's relentless, it's high energy. He normally he can now make 5 subs towards the end of the game, which you were going to see him use. We saw some of the previous managers at Spurs maybe make 1 or 2, sometimes no subs. Postecoglou will pretty much try to use his entire 5 most games, even if some fans will be very disappointed at certain players that might come on or whatever. The idea is because he needs fresh legs to carry out the pressing and the box-to-box nature of what he wants. So while you might not always agree with who it is, it's kind of the attributes they're bringing in those areas that is going to be the reason he brings them on. And now I think for him to look at a bench and be able to bring on a world-class player in Sonny, one of the best Premier League midfielders in his Bissouma, a £47.5 million signing in Brennan Johnson, and he also, if he needed, had is one of the best young centre backs in Europe in Radu Dragićin, and he had just got options everywhere on that bench. The experience of Højbjerg, the youthful energy of Skippy. People couldn't even get on the bench. Brian Hill and Dane Scarlett couldn't even get on the bench. Lo Celso's now back in training. You'd imagine he'll be involved against Wolves next week on the bench. So probably one of Skip or Højbjerg is going to have to come out of the team as well for that out of the bench. It's it's what he's been aiming for. It's been having this strong squad, it's as he said. I asked him about it. He kind of said at the start of the season, you saw that we were impacting games late on, and that was because of having the ability to rotate late in games and bring on players that are almost as, if not as good, to influence the result. And it worked exactly. And I was so happy for Sonny as well, because let's be honest, it was a really kind of positive way for him to end what's been a really tough week for him. Of course it has. South Korea going out in the semi-finals to Jordan, who ended up losing to Qatar in the final. I saw his tweet, Instagram post after the game. Sonny kind of summed it up nicely. He said, "Happy to be back. We left it late, but with you behind us, we always knew we had a chance for 3 points. Thank you everyone for your support. Welcoming me back. I can't speak today. Thank you everyone for your support, welcoming me back. It was a tough week, but you have all lifted me." You could see he was pumped up as soon as he came on. He started to kind of really doing that whole raising the crowd thing, which, it was a funny one, because what I would say is that it was a brilliant, kind of the triple change of those 3 coming on, Son, Bissouma and Johnson. You would have thought, they were all ready to come on. It was going to invigorate the game. And then Spurs scored. Sarr obviously scored his lovely little finish. And it was a bit like, okay, but then he still made the 3 subs. A little bit difficult, not difficult, kind of unfortunate, I guess, for Kulusevski, who'd played a big part in the goal as well, and had really looked good in the second half. First half he wasn't, but second half, I think Stupinan was the guy he was up against, and he absolutely had the beating of him every time. And you were kind of like, okay, fair enough, the quality of those 3 players. And of course, Johnson doesn't come on, he's not going to get that late winner. Obviously, you don't know how else the game could have gone, the butterfly effect, all that sort of stuff. But when those 3 players came on, the rhythm just went, it just went flat as anything. It was really weird. It was almost like he made the changes, but he didn't have the desired effect at all. Actually, if anything, Spurs really kind of fell out of their shape. And it was only in those final moments when those changes really had the desired impact. Obviously Son and Johnson combining for the goal. But yeah, it was quite fascinating that a triple change that really you felt should have just made everything happen didn't. And it was purely, I think, because of the goal. Maybe had they come on and there hadn't been a goal, maybe it changes the dynamic, but actually changed it the other way. It was very odd. Very odd. But hey, it worked in the end, and that's what the most important thing is. I asked him about just the ability to bring on those players and just how it's like a world away what he's had in recent weeks, where he's been a bit, you could see a little bit reticent to turn to his bench because there's a lot of players that either aren't the attacking players he needs to change the game, or young players that maybe aren't ready to change games in that way. And he said, yeah, it's very important. I think at the beginning of the year, we won a few games late on because of that, like the quality on the bench. And I think we have that capability now of putting guys on who can make an impact. I thought they did today. And it also keeps guys on their toes if they're not performing, and it gives me some options. I was putting on some good players and guys who can make an impact. But again, they've got to do that, especially in that midfield, front third. We've been pretty limited lately in terms of what we can do. Just to give us a little bit more energy. Obviously, Brighton were doing really well, but they were working really hard to stay in the game. They're going to get tired. The fact that we could bring on two attacking players who are going to be a threat. It maybe looks simple, but that ball that Sonny plays, that's a world-class player in a clutch moment finding the right pass. You can't do that if you can't bring him on, if it's somebody else. Even Brennan getting on the far post. By the way, someone always thinks, there's always a comment that says I say Brendan Johnson. I don't, I say Brennan. I think it's just the way I say it. Maybe sounds like there's a D in the middle. Brendan. Yeah, Brendan. Sounds quite different. But even Brennan getting on the far post, we've helped him to do that, said Postecoglou. It's not about confidence in the changes. I feel like with the squad we have for today and hopefully moving forwards, we do have that ability, irrespective of where the game's at, to finish games strongly. So yeah, Sonny on his return, that was... I kept saying to George Sessions from PA, it just would be lovely if Sonny has a big moment. I was kind of talking more about scoring, but like I say, the quality of that assist was just sublime. And I think just for him to have that big moment after a difficult time for him, when you could see how personally he took the Asian Cup exit, because, the nation's kind of hopes were resting on him. And, Jurgen Klinsmann hasn't been the most popular kind of coach South Korea's probably ever had. Watched the very awkward press conference he did at Seoul Airport when he landed at the airport in Seoul. It was a guy under pressure. Let's put it that way. Even though they got to the semi-finals, but there's still just this feeling that they underperformed throughout the tournament, and there was a lot of kind of extra time stuff that they had to go to when they shouldn't have. And I mean, against Jordan, I don't think they had a shot on target, or was it even a shot on goal? I can't remember, but it wasn't good. But with Postecoglou, you feel like a real deep respect for Sonny. It goes back to another bit of Sonny heartbreak, unfortunately, the 2015 Asian Cup final when Postecoglou's Australia beat Sonny's South Korea, despite Sonny scoring and sending it to extra time, I think it was, if I remember correctly. But I just think he just knows what a player he's got. And he made this comment after the game, which I think some people took it as a pop at the South Korean national team and Klinsmann and all that. I didn't think it was. I don't think that was ever the intention. I think what he was trying to say is that he sees Sonny as world class. And maybe people within the club see Sonny as world class, but because he doesn't come from one of football's big superpowers, like ones that have won the World Cup multiple times, like an Argentina, Brazil, maybe Italy, maybe England. England's a little bit different, I think, maybe because the whole Premier League elevates English players to kind of trying to be in that bracket. Or Spain, I guess, is another one. But maybe because he's from South Korea, who obviously got a lot of talented footballers, but aren't seen as a football powerhouse, haven't won, the World Cup. They even won the Asian Cup. They must have done. I know they won. I don't know. Oh, please, anyone let me know. It's one of those that I probably should know. I think all I can speak is from Sonny's time. Obviously, that's the closest he's come from the 2015. I wonder if they have. They must have done in all those. I don't know. But anyway. The point remains, I read you his quote, and you can see what I mean. It feeds into that rather than being a pop at his nation's football or anything like that. I think it is more just saying if he'd been from somewhere like Brazil or Argentina or Spain or whatever, a football superpower, he would be seen as world class when he just is world class. He said, maybe the nation he plays for works against him, but I think he's a world-class player. You look at his record in the Premier League, the toughest league in the world, his goal contributions, irrespective of how the team's gone through the time he's been here, have always been right up there. Even this year, before he left, I think he was probably the best attacking player in the competition. Just my opinion, obviously. Certainly he'd be up there. He's a world-class player. I thought we did well to cover his absence. Richie obviously stepped up in terms of goal threat and a few others, but to have a world-class player for the run-in is brilliant for us. And yeah, he was a bit knackered. He apparently wanted to start. He was keen to kind of start and play, but Postecoglou and the sports science staff let's not risk anything, because I think he played the Monday night with South Korea, had a long flight back on Tuesday, got back on Wednesday, came in on Thursday, did recovery work at Hospital Way, but he didn't really have... The only training session he had ahead of the game was Friday, which would have been quite a light one. So they didn't throw him in from the start. I don't think it would have done him any favours. And to be honest, worked a treat, because he had the energy and quality, because he wasn't tired, to put in that incredible ball in those final moments. So, it was a move that worked. And he's now got 17 goal involvements in his 20 Premier League games this season. That's obscene. It's absolutely obscene. 12 goals, 5 assists. And hopefully now, for these remaining games of the season, was it 14 games, if I can count, he puts all the international disappointments in the rearview mirror and just ploughs forward and makes it kind of a season to remember at Tottenham, because there's a long way to go still. Even though it's not that many matches, by the sounds of it, there's still a lot of twists and turns to happen in the weeks and months ahead. So delighted for Sonny to give him kind of have happy Sonny again, because he feels like almost he's had the weight of he's had the weight of a whole nation on his shoulders, and now it's that burden, I guess, is off him when he's back at Spurs. And there's a different kind of burden. It's being the captain, being the same obviously as he is for his country, but being one of a talented group of players. Whereas I feel like at South Korea, just all eyes are on him. They've got some very, very good players, South Korea, but that everyone looks to Sonny in that team. We'll see what the rest of the season brings for him. But I would be stunned if he doesn't reach 20 Premier League goals by the end of this season as well. Who knows? The way he's going, he could end up with 30 goal involvements this season. 17 and 20, that would be another 13 in 14. Who knows? He's more than capable of doing that. So great for him. Great for Brennan Johnson as well. I thought that was a big moment for him. He's had a tough time of it in recent weeks. He has. He struggled for form. He's admitted that himself, and his confidence, you can see, has taken a knock. I don't think it's been helped, of course, by the fact that some fans have been targeting him on social media. He's 22 years old. He's had abuse to such a degree that he's had to turn off the comments of people that he doesn't follow on Instagram. That is such a sad indictment of football fandom today, that, let alone even a young player being abused, but one being abused when he's just 6 months in at a much bigger club, obviously in terms of recent history, having to adapt to a very different kind of football, and just the added pressures that brings. I still will never understand what goes through people's minds that feel the need to do that. But it's just really sad that, you look at his comments under his Instagram post yesterday, which was a great moment for him, and the Spurs fans weren't able to congratulate him because of a few mindless muppets, quite frankly, that just feel that's how they have to do it. That's how they have to get it out their system, is just to abuse and troll people online. I'll never get it. I just don't know how it takes that form for people. Of course, be disappointed with someone's performance by all means, and discuss it with your mates and stuff like that. But why personally target them afterwards? It's a bit weird. It is a bit weird. I think it does say more about them than anything. But yeah, it was just sad that people couldn't kind of enjoy it with him on Instagram and tell him how much of a massive impact he made in the game, because he did. He had a couple of moments beforehand where you could see the nerves, you could see the lack of confidence, but then to step up in that kind of final important key moment when that ball is going across, in his mind it probably slowed down to the like something from the Matrix, watching it come across, and it's probably his brain's going, don't miss it, you can't miss this, and he just rockets it into the back of the net. Yeah, I mean, look, yes, Sonny put it on a plate for him. It was a terrific cross, but you've still got it. I saw a game yesterday. I don't know. Was it in the A League maybe? Someone missing an open goal from just right in front of it. He got round the keeper or beaten the keeper to the ball, but he still managed to knock it wide. So it's very doable. But yeah, I was delighted for Johnson. I really was, and he's got 4 goal involvements in his past 7 Premier League games now. He's contributing. He is. And it's been a stop-start season for him. I still don't think that initial hamstring injury helped him at all. It came at a really important time when he was trying to learn the Postecoglou way. And I do think since then he's been a little bit wary sometimes about absolutely sprinting and letting his legs go. And you know what? I think he's a player that is just going to grow. He's learning from Postecoglou. He's learning from people like Son. Having Son there as a mentor is an amazing thing for him. And I do think another thing that's hit him as well is that he's had to play every minute in recent kind of games before the last couple because there was no one else to come in. And so even if his confidence was dipping or his form was dropping a little bit or he was tired, he was still having to go out there. And there's this kind of feeling within the club that he did need a little bit of a rest. He needed to Postecoglou used the perfect expression. He said it was good for him just to sit there for a moment in a game and see the match from a different perspective, from a different view, what he needed to do when he came on. And I don't think it's any amazing coincidence that he's come off in 2 games. He's been finally able to be put on the bench to have a little bit of a breather and take stock. And in both of those home games he's been on the bench, he's come on and scored. It's not rocket science. It's a young player, 22 years old. Honestly, I don't like abusing players of any kind or criticism of players of any kind, but when they're so young, it seems even more incredible because they've got so much learning, developing and growing to do. You'll often hear me talking about young players and the road they've got ahead and how much they have to kind of do to get there. So I just find it mad that people kind of trying to almost push them off that path before they've even got going. So yeah, huge moment for him. He is very raw, of course he is, but he's got all of the tools to be a really, really top Premier League player. And it's listening to Postecoglou. It's listening to Ryan Mason. Ryan Mason, the attacking coach in Spurs training sessions, will be telling Johnson constantly, get in that back post. Every time you see someone coming down left, getting that back post, get there, whether it's your head, whether it's your foot, whatever. And we are seeing him starting to learn to do that. And because it's something that, hasn't always been instinctive to him. Yeah, he scored a fair few goals for us, especially the year they came up. But he has been in different roles where it's not his job to be there at that back post. But he is learning and he's doing what they say. And it was... he needs his belief in himself. He needs the belief of the fans around him. And that's why moments like yesterday are huge for his development. And seeing him in front of that South Stand was terrific. It will keep building that bond between them. Even if some people on social media aren't ever going to probably take to him, maybe, as often is the way with certain players, I think the people in the stadium will. And as I've always said, if social media existed in some players existed to the degree it does today. Some players like Harry Kane when he started off and being alone at various clubs, there would have been people trashing him from the start. There was Gareth Bale when he couldn't even win a game at Spurs. People were probably saying, we bought this young Wales international again from, Southampton. He's doing nothing. And you could just imagine that had they kind of been cut off in their prime at that point. So, look, I'm not saying Brennan Johnson's going to reach that level. It'd be lovely if he does of both those players. But he's definitely got all the attributes to be a terrific young player. And an older player as well. And it was just lovely to see the way he was with the crowd at the end. And Fraser Forster gave him a massive shove in the post-match stuff. Just throw him almost into the front of the... just to have his own little moment at the South Stand. And all of this will help. All of this will help his journey because it has been difficult for him. For a young guy trying to make his way at a bigger club and with the increased competition now, Timo Werner's come in. That's going to cause him some problems. I thought Timo Werner was okay yesterday. Wasn't one of his best performances. There's still, for him, I think he'll learn to make the correct decision when it comes to the final ball. There were a couple of really good ones. There were probably more not so good ones when he got into some good positions. And like Johnson, I do feel like he needs to trust his body to just sprint at the defender more often than he does. When you've got players like Johnson and Werner on either flank, use that pace, quickly release. And that's another aspect of the midfield that we've said before, not quite clicking yet. Getting the ball to those fast players quickly is going to be key. And the amount of times Postecoglou goes, "Oh no!" on the sideline, you're going to see him getting so angry when someone's delayed a pass or they've let an opposition player block it. So, you'll see much more of these players coming into their fore under Postecoglou because those wide forward areas, and Kulusevski as well, and Manar Solomon when he comes back too, you'll see them kind of. We know Sonny's brilliant, but all of these guys will learn the Postecoglou system. I guess Sonny's still got to learn it as well. He can always keep learning. No player should ever feel that they're the finished article. And knowing Sonny, the kind of guy he is, he won't either. He'll feel. I think he said he's constantly still learning under Postecoglou. But yeah, Johnson spoke after the game. He said it's so special. And moments like that are what you dream of as a player. Even today when I was on the bench, I knew that when we came on... I knew when we come on, there is such good quality in the team. Coming on with a player as good as Sonny, when he gets the ball down the left-hand side, his crossing is unbelievable, especially off both feet. It was just to make sure I got it in. It felt like I was coming in slow motion, but to get the ball in the back of the net is a special feeling. And he said another little video he did for Spurs that, like I say, he admitted he was nervous seeing that come along. And that's a kind of a knock-on effect of everything that's happened to him in recent weeks. But as it becomes more and more instinct, those nerves will vanish. He said the performance today probably wasn't as good, and in the first half, they showed how good they are as a team because they have some unbelievable players, and their system is really good. To get the goal and get the win, it feels really good because we weren't at our best, and to get the 3 points going into another tough game next week is what we needed. We did make it hard for ourselves. They play the same football every single week, and we did prepare well for the game, but we were reacting instead of being on the front foot. Once they play their football, they're a really good team, and they definitely grew in confidence in that first half. So going into the second half, we knew we had to stamp it out because if we keep playing the football, if they keep playing the football they play, they will create chances. They had a few chances where they could have extended the lead, but the intensity we brought in the second half was the foundation to get the result. And like I say, Johnson will now have to scrap for his place. That's the beauty of competition. There's so many kind of people up there. Kulusevski, you'd imagine with Sonny's, we know he's going to be the left winger in pretty much every game, barring tiredness or injury, just because of the level of his game. So that means Johnson, Kulusevski and Werner pretty much with Manar Solomon then coming back into the mix, all fighting for that spot on the right-hand side. Brian Hill as well. I would say the fact that he wasn't even on the bench yesterday, which is somewhat ironic against the team that, he had the opportunity to move to. He wouldn't have been involved anyway because, you can't go to a team on loan in the Premier League and then play against your parent club. But yeah, you'd imagine it will be mainly between Kulusevski, Werner and Johnson. I feel sorry for Manar Solomon. I asked about him on Friday, and Postecoglou said that he's had another operation on Monday. I think it's to do with some of the stitching within his knee was causing him some problems. It wasn't quite right. So they had an operation on Monday just to fix that. And then I think 2 to 3 weeks, Postecoglou said he should be back. But yeah, he's just had a season wiped out, pretty much. It's very unfortunate for him. But, he'll be one that's still got a big part to play. He's still quite young himself. Was he 24, 25? I think something like that. He's not old at all. But yeah, Johnson, you can see the buzz behind the scenes about the amount of quality players now all competing. On the training ground as well is a big thing. He said, it's just excitement. Everyone is back. We've missed some really key players. Now in training, we'll be doing the starters against the sub-team. And most times you won't even be able to tell who's starting because the quality is so high. We have that competition in training. There's never any bad blood. Everyone gets on so well in training. And we just want to push ourselves. Sounds a bit Sean Connery there. Sean. It shows like today and against Brentford, when people aren't at it for one reason or another, it's not down to them, but it shows the squad and the players coming on can make a good impact. You don't play that well or with that togetherness if everyone isn't on board. Everyone is firmly on board with how the manager plays. At half-time, he was so frustrated because we came away from the way we want to play. And when we score goals like that, it is stuff we work on day in, day out. So it's a nice feeling because it is rewards paying off. And that's it. They're all in the Postecoglou classroom now. They're all learning from it and what to do. And as I said, and I'll keep saying it, if they're going to score winning goals in his own style of football, it's going to make them do that more often. So, negatives, other than the fact that they were just quite kind of off it for periods of the game. Just general rustiness, I think, there's still there. Rodrigo Bentancur, of course, is, it just shows that even a 3-time Serie A title winner is going to have little sticky moments, little rusty. Larry David, little kind of sticky, rusty moments there. From what I understand from people within the club, as he was going through his rehabilitation, getting towards the end of it, there was this feeling last year that you weren't going to see the best version of Rodrigo Bentancur until next season, so the 24-25 season. And that's not particularly to him. That is purely because when you've had a serious long-term injury, your kind of body needs to rebuild itself, and almost like the player has to re-educate themselves on all the things that they did that was natural and instinctive. Suddenly, they just haven't done it for so long, or they've barely done it. And I think because Bentancur is such a warrior, came back early, would have come back early from that injury as well as the ankle one if he could have. But I think because of the way he played in that 32 minutes or so, in particular against Aston Villa, before Matty Cash decided he didn't need his ankle anymore, that I think raised some expectations, and people kind of forgot about that initial kind of prognosis that he would not be anywhere near his best until the following season. I think a lot of players that have had cruciate ligament injuries, that's the kind of the idea is that, yeah, they'll come back within a season, but it'll be the next one when you see them really back in their groove again. But I would say that since returning from the ankle injury, maybe the Man U game aside, where he was very good, let's say you've seen a player that has only played, I've written it down here somewhere, 563 minutes of club football in the past year. 563 minutes. There is no way he's going to be sharp. There's no way he's going to be anywhere near his best. So it is kind of understandable that, he's going to have little moments like he did yesterday. And the thing that you always trust about Bentancur when he's in when he's in his groove, is that you can give him the ball pretty much anywhere and not worry about him worry about the ball being lost. But yes, there were a few moments. Obviously, he lost the ball in the build-up to the penalty that Brighton got. He lost the ball not long after Vicario passed to him. He lost the ball, and that was the Mitoma chance. What I would say is Van de Ven and Vicario's passes to him weren't the greatest, but that's what I'm saying, is that with Bentancur, they just kind of trust normally that they can just give it to him because he'll twist and turn, he'll get away with the ball. He just has one of those players that has an extra yard in his brain, but at the moment, he's not in that groove yet. He's not in that form of sharpness. And he had another moment when he span a player and he got very lucky that kind of the ball managed to ricochet back into his path. Otherwise, that would have been another chance for Brighton in a really kind of dangerous area. He's just a guy that kind of makes the difficult look simple normally, but at the moment, he's just not back to that level, and that's entirely understandable. It was really interesting. As he came out for the second half, he was walking out of the tunnel with Bissouma, and Bissouma was really having this quite kind of intense, like almost pep talk to him, really kind of trying to build him up. And as Bentancur went on the pitch, Bissouma shouted something at him, and as he went back to the dugout himself. And I love that. I love the idea of, because Bissouma is probably the most natural number 6 Spurs have got right now. I'm still not entirely sure whether Bentancur fully fits the number 6 role, but he definitely obviously has a lot of the attributes to play in it, although Postecoglou made it very clear to us this week that 6s and 8s don't really exist in his system, and he wants to kind of get away from that. Everyone should be able to do everything. I get that, but there are naturally some players that sit that little bit deeper, I do feel. But yeah, I thought that was really important that Bissouma was kind of trying to build up his teammate, knowing that this is a guy that at times they may keep each other out of the team. At times they'll play alongside each other, which, Postecoglou kind of let slip was one of his plans when he arrived at the club as well. So, and to be fair, after that little pep talk, Bentancur did improve. He was better in the second half, but kind of ran out of steam a little bit. But what kind of not worried me, but was sad to see, was that in those moments when he was struggling, Bentancur, when he was giving the ball away, in the immediate aftermath, his head was down. He really, his head drooped a lot. And this is a guy that, like I say, the rest of the team look to as a bit of a leader as well. And as the guy, like I say, they can trust with the ball. And I think to see him like that maybe had a little bit of a knock-on effect. So, yeah, I'm sure he'll be fine. He'll get there. Just take a little bit of time. Maybe like Brennan Johnson, he needs a little bit of time on the bench to watch the game, coming into a game and impacting it with fresh legs rather than kind of trying to dominate the pitch from the off when he's not quite there yet. And you may see that in the weeks ahead, maybe even next week against Wolves. You might see a midfield of, let's say, Bissouma, Sarr and Maddison, perhaps, and just let Bentancur come in and affect the game and build up his sharpness and fitness. Sarr, I guess you kind of see the contrast in the dynamism and the energy as well that Sarr had, which we know Bentancur's got. It's just not quite there at the moment. Sarr played 48 passes to Bentancur's 28, which is surprising in itself. To be fair, he was on the pitch for 18 minutes more, but that normally isn't going to kind of produce quite that disparity between the two numbers. He also had a higher pass success rate, 83.3% to Bentancur's 82.1%, and he had 57 touches to Bentancur's 39. He just had that little bit more about his game at both ends, box-to-box play. He has now scored in back-to-back matches for Spurs that he started in. 2 home games as well. Obviously, he scored against Man U. It was Man U, wasn't it? Ooh, I'm trying to remember now. Sorry, I hate saying something that I know afterwards. People are going to say, no, it wasn't. And I know that I can look very quickly because I have a lot of shortcuts to all of their stats because I'm that kind of nerd. Bournemouth. Glad I checked. Of course, it wasn't Man U. He was away by then and also injured at that point as well. Yes, it was Bournemouth at home. Of course, it was. But Sarr was good. Yeah, he had some loose passes. Of course, he did. But I just felt like he's just becoming a bit of an undroppable in that team. He's such an exciting young player. There's so many times that George from PA and I were just watching things he was doing like, oh, did you see that? He's got such a great mentality about the way he plays as well. Tactical intelligence, movement, attacking ability, just the knowledge of when to get back as well. And again, was he 21 years old? That's just going to grow and improve. The goal was very much deserved. Made a terrific driving run through the middle. Kulusevski picked him out perfectly. The ball into his path was flawless. Took it on, tried to get it across to Richarlison. Lewis Dunk gets his foot to it, knocks it against the right-hand post. And to be fair, again, one of those that made to look simple, but actually a left-footed finish from a really tight angle. It was a really nice finish from Sarr. And he did the old jumping into, not quite jumping, but kind of pushing himself into the crowd to get their love and hugs and all that. And got himself the yellow card, as unfortunately is always the way nowadays. Very much richly deserved for his efforts as well. Bissouma came on, replaced Bentancur, of course, the last half hour or so. I felt he grew into the game, got better and better as it wore on. And interestingly, just like his stats that I'd written down here, he was only on the pitch for 30 minutes or so, but he produced 3 interceptions and 3 clearances, which was double what Bentancur and Sarr had managed between them in the rest of the game. And that's the thing with Bissouma. Even when he was out of form, and I've said this before, he was one of the highest, had the highest tackling numbers in the Premier League. He was right up. I think he was second highest before he went off to the Africa Cup of Nations. So even when he's not contributing in terms of being dominant on the ball, he's disrupting and interrupting the other team's flow. And that's a massive thing, I think. He's had a tough couple of weeks as well. He had contracted malaria before the Africa Cup of Nations, and it went just into the tournament, as Postecoglou explained on Friday. He also picked up, I think it was a muscle injury in training, which meant he couldn't play in the last 16. And he just wasn't really featuring regularly for Mali at the Africa Cup of Nations. Started only 2 games out of the 4 or 5 that he was involved in. And it just seems very excited to be back. I mean, you might have seen the funny little video of Maddison saying he's only been back 2 minutes, and he's putting on his music, dancing, twerking in the dressing room. I think he's in his happy place at Spurs, and I think we'll see Bissouma, I think, come back to be quite a big part of this remainder of the season. He's going to have a big role to play for Spurs. And let's not forget that the Bissouma, Sarr and Maddison axis was the one that kind of existed early in the season. Spurs got a lot of joy through games under Postecoglou in. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't come back against Wolves, and Bentancur might find himself with Skippy and Højbjerg just kind of just out of or one of the odd men out, as it were. But I don't think that would be the worst thing for Bentancur. I think he can come on in games and impact them as he starts to build his confidence and form up again as well. So there's a lot of work still to be done in this Postecoglou team. He knows it. At no point does he get carried away with it. He absolutely doesn't, because he knows they're only 6 months into such a huge project. And games like this will just show the road ahead. They show the good things that work. They show the bad things that aren't, and what they need to improve on if they're going to dominate games as much as he wants them to. I mean, as I say, that late, that's like I was Granville, open all hours, on for the kids there. Moments like that kind of show that, it's the old cliched expression, trust the process. But it is such a true expression right now. What he's trying to do, they need to trust it. And look, that can be said about the fans as well, and journalists. We're going to bundle us all up together in this. And look, being a fan of Tottenham Hotspur is never easy. I'm fully aware of that. I know that, of course, myself, having always been a Spurs fan from the moment I emerged in this world. And it can be difficult to appreciate, I guess, what you've come from and what you're trying to get to when a disappointing result like the one at Goodison Park comes along. It was a punch to the gut, but what I would say, it didn't knock Spurs to the canvas, if we're going to keep going with the boxing terminology. And I do think sometimes all of us just stepping back and looking at the big picture helps. It is worth remembering that, just sometimes, just I know we've said it before, but just sometimes just take a breath. And I have to do this myself. Again, this might sound like I'm preaching. I'm not. This is myself as well. Sometimes when I, some people said my last video was a little bit negative, and maybe it was, but hopefully I've tried to be quite balanced. But sometimes you do have to just take a step back and think, look, Spurs lost their best player on the eve of this season. Just literally like a day or two before the first game of it. They were, as I say, ripping everything up from the club, within the club, starting things afresh, with a manager, unproven in the Premier League. Some might say at this level. Of course, he won trophies galore elsewhere in the world, and again, might be a football snobbery, but there was some kind of question marks over could he do what he's done elsewhere at Spurs. So I think if anyone had said to you, do you know what? Here's an offer for you. I'll tell you that by mid-February, you'll be in the top 4 at the moment of recording this. You'll be in the top 4. Only 5 defeats from 24 Premier League games. 7 points off the top of the league. And you'll be the league's 3rd top scorer. All just 6 months into a massive overhaul. Would you take that? That reminds me of Martin Landau in Entourage. Is that something I can interest you in? I think we would have all bitten their hands off. Yes, look, the cup exits were a disappointment. Of course they were. But would I have probably taken that in terms of the league? Of course. I think I'm sure I would have, to be honest. It's a young team. They're going to be inconsistent. You're going to have performances that are not fully formed. You're going to have games where you have little frustrating periods where they forget what they're meant to do. They step away from the plan a little bit because, they're just young players. That's what they do. It's very rare that a young team goes all the way and is consistently amazing. They're going to have little peaks and troughs. That's the way it works. But for context, just to throw it in there, only because I looked at the league table, I was like, what? Spurs have scored 20 more goals this season than sixth place Man United. 20 more goals. That might say more about Man United, I don't know. But Spurs are the third top scorers, like I say, in the Premier League. Joint top. I think Newcastle yesterday also kind of went joint with them on 51 goals they've got. 51 goals from 24 matches. It's like 2 goals a game. That's pretty good. Yeah, it really is. And look, I know that not everything Postecoglou says is going to go down well with some fans. He made a comment in the press conference on Friday about, what was it? He said, look, we're just going to be a team that is going to score late goals and we're going to concede late goals. That's just the team we are, because I will want them to always push at the end of the matches to score, regardless of whatever's happened in the game. I think some people are a bit like, they didn't like that. I understand where it comes from. People saying that maybe you should have a bit more kind of nous and awareness of when at the end of the game to maybe sit back and defend. Although I would say there is a certain irony in that we all of us, myself included, will kind of really bemoan the fact that Spurs did have an inclination to sit back in the past, and they would invite pressure on themselves in doing so. And we'd often say, no, go in for the kill, show no mercy. And now, obviously, some people are saying, they've got a manager who actually agrees with them, and it kind of scares them. Like, no, I don't know if I actually wanted that. I know I said it, but I'm not sure I wanted that. But it is the old cliche, attack is the best form of defence. If you've got the ball up the end of the pitch, you're more likely to prevent that being the case as well. And he actually spoke about that again yesterday. He said, I wasn't trying to be flippant the other day, but if you look at all my teams historically, they've always done that, because the way we approach it is the way we approach it is the clock and the scoreboard shouldn't dictate how you play. So if that's your mentality, you should always be looking for goals, irrespective of whether we're winning 1-0 or losing 1-0. Now, sometimes that feels counterintuitive when you're winning 1-0, but I think it helps you in games like this when you're chasing the game, because you don't have to change anything. There's no instructions from me. The players know what we do anyway, so it doesn't mean a major shift. If you're trying to become a team that's dominant and win games of football, I just felt I'd rather err on that side rather than trying to protect things that you have. And it's true. How many times have we seen Spurs concede late goals in previous seasons and said, like, oh, if you're just going to sit back like that, you're going to invite it, and we just know what's coming. And now some of us are kind of criticising the other way. And what I would say is, look, a lot have been made, myself included. I kind of mentioned it about the league high 8 goals that they conceded in the 90th minute or later this season. But I do think the caveat has to be added. And actually, Jason, I was on the Last Word on Spurs podcast in midweek, which is always great fun. I always do it like twice a year. That's my kind of one podcast I'll go on, just because I've known those guys for a long time. And Jason made a great point, as he often does. He speaks very well. When I talk about measured Spurs fans, ones that kind of look at it all and are a bit calmer, he's definitely one of them. And he said that, look, it's important to note that of those 8 goals, how very few of them actually resulted in any points being lost. There were, some of them were consolation goals. I think only 2 of them. I've got it maybe written down here. Certainly Goodison Park one was 1. I'm trying to remember what the other one was. There was another one where it did. But other than that, they've been consolation goals when they've already been up, or even 2 of them were the late Chelsea goals when Spurs were already 2-1 down. They let in another couple late on with 9 men. But it's also worth noting at the other end of the pitch, Spurs have now scored 5 in the 90th minute or later, which has brought in 8 extra points. So they've given 5 away with late goals, but they've actually got 8 from scoring late goals. So yeah, I think that's definitely shows that Postecoglou's way, on the whole, it brings more rewards than it does punishment. Look, that's not to say they shouldn't have more clean sheets. Absolutely. Again, yesterday, just a moment with a daft penalty, really, and a mistake that was on Spurs' part. And otherwise, they kind of kept Brighton out. Like I say, Vicario he made that an early save from Welbeck, made a save from Matoma, and that was it, really, other than being sent the wrong way from the penalty. From that point on, he didn't really have much to do at all. So there is enough quality in there. I thought Van der Ven had a bit of a sticky first half. Had a few moments. He was caught in possession for that Welbeck shot really early on, and of course caught Welbeck for the penalty. I thought maybe it's just funny. It's just sometimes it's the way it happens. In a week where he's had praise from everyone, everyone now knows he's the Premier League's fastest player since it began. That penalty, by the way, I'd written this down, was the 6th penalty of the season for Spurs, which is the most of any team in the league. Obviously, that has to be rectified. It's not everything can be in their control. Sometimes there's been VAR moments that have gone a little bit against them. Talking of VAR and stuff like that, interesting to see that Postecoglou and maybe Mile Jedinak did make an adjustment to help Vicario out from set pieces and things like that. James Maddison, who often torments the opposition, was being the tormentor to the tormentor to the tormentor. I said last week about, it would be great if Spurs could put someone in the way, in between whoever is trying to disrupt Vicario when these set pieces are being put under the crossbar. And that's exactly what they did. Maddison kind of just got in the way, and that in itself, even without the defending aspect of it, creates this thing that the referee focuses on. Because in that scenario, pretty much those two players, the player in between the goalkeeper and them, and the player trying to disrupt the goalkeeper, there's always a to-in and throw-in, there's a pushing, there's a shoving, and it's very obvious. The referee will often see it and he'll warn them. And I think it was the very first set piece that they had where that was happening. He gave a foul against the Brighton player. So it just draws that little bit more attention to it. And Maddison, we know, is very good at winding people up as well. So it probably works perfectly. And actually, Spurs, Postecoglou admitted in the week, the club, not him, but the club had submitted evidence to the PGMOL, the Referees Association, just to show incidents where Vicario has been impeded. Obviously, we know about the City and Everton ones, but presumably the other little moments as well where it's happened. And just ask for clarity. Like, what exactly are the rules in this scenario? Is this allowed or is it not? And if you're allowed to impede or obstruct the goalkeeper, that's fine, but we'll have to adapt and deal with it. If not, can you clamp down and start, actually giving fouls for it then rather than goals against? Which I think is an important thing. That's the kind of, I know it's a cliche, but it's a big club way of operating. It's going to them and saying, look, can you focus on that for us, please? Because it's not right in our view. But if you're saying it is right and the laws have changed to reflect that it's now allowed, fine, we'll kick on with it. But again, like the Maddison thing, at the least it's drawing eyes upon it and focus. And that's an important thing for them as well. So Maddison was looking out for Vicario. Richarlison was looking out for Maddison. There was a moment when Pascal Gross and Maddison fell to the floor after some kind of challenge or something at the touchline near the Brighton goal. And they had a little bit of a kind of pushing and shoving on the pitch, like tangle of legs. Richarlison steamed over like he was going to tear Gross apart. And it was really interesting. It was like Maddison just went just like, no, kind of thing. It was almost like, I wrote in my piece this morning, it was like a celebrity when their bodyguard watches this fan come over and give them a hug, and they're about to pick up the fan and just lob them away somewhere. And they're like, no, it's all right. It's just a hug. I thought it was really nice. A, that Richarlison had his back, and that B, that it was this kind of moment where Maddison was like, no, it's all right. I got this. It's fine. Richarlison had an interesting game. He kind of had some not misses, but he was denied in a 1v1 with the keeper. He's in the stage where, for me, Sonny, when he was a little bit younger, used to be in. Where, do you remember we used to say that if Sonny had a lot of time to think about a shot, he maybe wouldn't put it in the net, whereas if he had less time and it's instinctive, he would. And I actually think Sonny has, over the years, just improved and learned that even in those moments where it's a 1v1, he will now finish a lot of them off as well, which is massive testament to him. But I feel like Richarlison's still back in that previous bit, whereas if he's got a little bit of time to think about it, he is maybe going to see his shot saved, whereas instinctive moments like, these first-time shots that he's hitting from Johnson passes or Werner passes or Doggy passes, he's knocking them straight into the net. And I feel like he had a couple of moments like that yesterday. But interestingly, I looked at who scored stats, which I always do after a game. Their database stats, so it's purely on the data around their performance. And Richarlison was Spurs' man of the match, according to the stats, which I thought was fascinating. And I looked at them, and to be fair, he did rack them up. 2 key passes, 3 dribbles, 4 shots with 1 on target. He won 2 aerial duels, and he made 2 clearances at the other end as well. So he was busy, and a lot of their play went through him, including the winning goal as well. So, Richarlison, I think that's important, that even in the game there he's not one of the goal scorers. It's still 9 in 9 Premier League, 9 in 9 goals in the Premier League for him. He's still contributing, I think. But as I say, the reason I kind of spoke about that, Madison, it's just the togetherness in the squad. It's lovely what's going on right now. There's definitely a real feeling that they're all in it together. Like I said earlier, even Dragoshin, has only played a handful of minutes thus far, and he's racing up the pitch to launch himself at these players. He's only known for a month, less than a month now. 3-4 weeks, and I think that's huge. A 21-year-old can come in and feel that part of things, and it is down to the leaders as well. I do think Sonny, Romero and Maddison are terrific leaders of the group, and they foster that. And then you've got people like Vicario and Bissouma, who behind the scenes are that next kind of level underneath, who are also bonding everyone together. And even people that you don't see as much, like a Fraser Forster, like a Ben Davies, like Emerson Royale, they're also key figures within the club as well, who are kind of really like a glue that binds everyone together, and maybe people don't always kind of understand that as well. Romero, talking about him, he obviously we know he stepped up while Sonny was away as a captain, and he doesn't do a lot of interviews, Romero, but when he does, they're superb. He did one while we were out on tour in when was that one? I think it was last summer. It was in Perth, I think, when he really kind of went deep into what went wrong under Conte, and how he just adores Spurs. Because remember, there was that whole thing about him preferring international duty and playing for Argentina, and he got really angry and really kind of went into that, and it was a terrific interview. And when he does his interviews, he speaks really well. And he did one with Sky this week. It was in Spanish, but we got the full translation and stuff. I'm going to read some of it out because I just thought it was really interesting. I do think he kind of almost communicates as powerfully as he plays at times. He said, "You can maybe say that I'm enjoying this season the most since I've been here. This season, the club have made some important changes which I think have helped to connect us with the supporters, as well as helping to grow and improve the club. By continuing with these important changes, we can aim to achieve even greater things. At the end of the day, the key thing for us players who spend a relatively short time here is to ensure we leave our mark and make an impression here. We do that by winning trophies, and winning silverware doesn't just depend on having a good manager and a squad of 25 or 26 good players. It depends on that atmosphere that you experience here every day, where you need to feel that extra pressure that we put on ourselves and that everyone around here puts on us, who all want to achieve stuff and do well. Recently, changes have come about within the club in every aspect to keep improving things, but these things take time. Because I don't think you can start winning trophies from one day to the next. But if the chairman and the club owners continue with these positive and important changes, we will get closer to being able to really compete at the very top with clubs like Manchester City and Liverpool." Yeah, I just thought, honestly, I'll go and listen to it or seek it out. I think kind of we think of Romero as this kind of almost like a caged beast of a player kind of thing, just this raw, passionate animal of a player. But actually, when he just stops and talks, he's very interesting, and he is very thoughtful, and he is, this guy is a World Cup winner. He has got these bundles of experience, and yes, there's some daft moments he does, but it also has to be a maturity as well to kind of what he brings off the pitch. Just found that really fascinating, the way he spoke about things, and the way he talks about life under Postecoglou as well, and because the Postecoglou era is in its infancy, and I do think we forget that. We got carried away with how exciting, the whole could they kind of thing to begin with, and it's like just enjoy it for what it is, but know that there's going to be some peaks and troughs as it they get to grips with it. I said this months ago. Postecoglou himself said there's going to be difficult times in the first season. There always are, especially early on. As they try to adapt, and again, maybe a little bit we were talking about Bentancur and his amazing kind of little cameo or half an hour against Villa before his ankle injury. Expectations were raised with Spurs as well, and we saw them adapt quite quickly to the way Postecoglou wanted. But in truth, it was only certain aspects of what he wanted. There's so much more for them to learn, and I'm just, again, I've used this word so many times in the last 6 months. It's excitement. It's about knowing what's to come, and also the determination that the players seem to be showing in trying to get there, and that's key. I wouldn't say we've always had a Spurs squad that's felt that determined, and we haven't always felt, the club as a whole has felt as determined as it does right now. Everyone in the right, pulling in the right direction as well. And it was interesting, Johan Lang did an interview in the week. He did his first kind of piece to camera talking about the transfer window. And that was one of the key things I took away from it, was he kept using this word alignment. That, you know, Daniel Levy, Scott Munn, Postecoglou, himself and his recruiting team, all pushing in the same direction to make sure the infrastructure of the club is built and improved. And that goes all the way down to the academy as well. He spoke really well. You know, you've heard me say before, he's a very quiet guy, a very focused guy, not a bit of like a showman as some other sporting director types are. He just kind of cracks on with it and gets on with what he's got to do. And it was very much an interview like that. It was a lot of insight. Really interesting to see how he loves the fact that he's got this very clear brief from Postecoglou and the type of players that he wants for his system. So he goes out to find these players that fit it like a glove. And that helps him and his team being specific. It's a good interview. It's about 9 minutes or so. Spurs have got it on their website. I did a transcript from it, which is on my Twitter feed or our website as well. But that was very good. What else have we had before I wrap up? Todd Klein. I think that was after the last video I did. He's now on his gardening leave. Spurs chief commercial officer. He will head to Chelsea at the end of that. Yeah, there's a split opinion, I think, on Todd Klein within the club, in terms of some people give him a lot of credit for playing his part in bringing in money into the club in terms of Gettier, cinch deals, renewing with Ineos, Formula One stuff with the F1 drive that's now open under the stadium. So he definitely brought a fair whack of money into the club, or played his part in doing so. But obviously stadium naming rights is a big thing that was part of his brief, and that did not arrive during his tenure at the club. When he come 2021, so I think it's around 3 years-ish that he's been here, maybe a little bit less. That there's a lot of factors to do with that as well, to be fair. You know, as I've said before, the club have found that they had found a lot more benefits from leaving Tottenham Hotspur on the stadium's name. A lot of kind of money was coming in because of that, and global brand awareness too. So there's an element of that, and maybe just also an element of just not finding the valuation, the fee that they want for such a deal, for which will be a long-term thing, or the type of company they want. So yeah, and also there's mixed views on him behind the scenes as well. There's, like I said, there's people that give him credit. I think there's also a narrative within the club that he had a huge overhaul within his department, changed a lot of people within it, and so a lot of popular, long-serving people who were highly rated moved on. There's also credit to balance that up with people saying that some of the people he brought in were very talented as well and have done a terrific job for the club. But I think maybe when you lose people like last month, the club lost what's his name? Fran Jones, went off to Brentford to become their chief commercial officer. No, it wasn't the same. It was maybe a different one. I can't remember what the name was. But he was like Spurs, maybe head of partnerships. I can't remember what the title was. But he was very highly rated. And I spoke to him out on a few tours. He was always very heavily involved in the tours and the money that came in for that, and the organisation of those. And he's a very clever guy, very switched on guy. And yeah, I do think Todd Klein's time at the club had its part to play, I think, in Fran Jones moving on to another club. So definitely lots of benefits, lots of stuff that, you know, people weren't happy with within the club. But either way, his time at Tottenham is coming to an end, and after, like I say, after this gardening leave, he'll head off to Chelsea, which will be a very different experience for him. My encounters with Todd Klein, always very pleasant, always very nice chap. Spoke to him out in South Korea when he sat down for lunch with us. Sat down as we were all having a few snacks, and chatted with us for a good hour about stuff. Not an interview, just a chat. And I've seen him at various times travelling to away games, and always very pleasant. Yeah, obviously some people that work for him kind of felt he was very a tough taskmaster, is the way I guess to put it. But hey, it's like any job, isn't it? Sometimes sometimes people rub others up the wrong way, and sometimes others find them, and just take them as you find them, I guess is the way to put it. So there's that. I did a really interesting interview with Peter Kisfaludi, who, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, who has worked with Spurs' incoming new signing next summer, Lucas Bergvall, since he was 9. He was the academy director at Bromma Poikana. I think that's where you say. I think the J sounds more like a Y, I've been told. Bromma Poikana in Sweden. And then he went to Djurgården 18 months ago, and he got them to take Bergvall to Djurgården with them because he realised how many clubs were trying to sign him. And he's fascinating. It's one of those interviews that is really good. And I'm not saying that's anything to do with me, the questioning, the way I've written it, anything. It's because Peter is a fascinating guy that gave a brilliant insight. And I just essentially let him run with it. The interview is just mainly his quotes, his words, explaining the background into Lucas, where he kind of came from, what kind of character he is, how he made his decision about whether he moved to Spurs over Barcelona, the feeling he got from Postecoglou, told me about a little welcome text he got from Sonny the moment he signed, his chat with Kulusevski. Peter worked with Kulusevski as well in the Bromma Poikana Academy before he went to Atalanta as well. And it's, I'm not going to go on about it here because I do think it needs to be read. It's and it's not saying give me page views or anything like that. I just think I can't do what he said justice just by talking about it. It's on my Twitter feed. It's on my on the website I work for, Football.London. So please do have a read. Actually, Bergvall, he had a little injury yesterday in Djurgården played a friendly, was against Vikings. I can't remember who it was they were playing. I think they lost 3-1, but he had a little injury early on that he was definitely struggling a little bit with, although he then went on to be like one of the best players on the pitch. I don't know how that ended with him or whether, but it didn't look serious, hopefully. I think it was just something that he kind of a knock that he kind of played on with. But honestly, what an exciting young player. And I asked Ange about him the other day, and he's very much looking forward to him coming along in the summer. Said they've got to be patient, obviously, because he's back in Sweden right now. And that was another part of the interview, as Peter explained to me how they're going to prepare him for the Premier League. I spoke about his family and also the Bromma Poikana Academy, which is this amazing thing in Sweden that just produces all of the top, so many of the top talents in Sweden that go there at a young age as well. So, yes, I do recommend it. What else have we had? The whole blue card Sinbin fiasco, which Postecoglou spoke about on Friday and essentially said it would destroy the game. He's not far wrong. Every manager has condemned it that I've seen. Seferin, the UEFA head, has condemned it from what I've seen. I think it's just one of these things where people just have to meddle. They have to justify their job, I guess, of being decision makers or innovative people and whatever. But just, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I'm absolutely Postecoglou on this. Like, why are you trying to clutter up a game and make it slower when the beauty of football is it's meant to be one of the fastest free-flowing games out there? By all means, take good things from other sports, but don't take things from other sports that actually slow down their game. It's ridiculous. And as he said, you'd have teams going down to 10 men for 10 minutes or so, and they just all would sit back and try to waste time to get their player back on the pitch. It would be a complete and utter waste of everyone's time. It would be horrendous for the sport. So it's something they're trialling at a lower level. You get sin bin and blue cards for dissent and cynical fouls. It's daft. Please do not let that ever come into the game because it would just be ridiculous. I get that it works in stuff like ice hockey. It would not work in football. It would be stupid. So there you go. I think that's everything. I think we kind of tried to rattle through as much as I could there. Hopefully lots of bits and pieces in there for you to get your teeth into. I'm not actually going to be at the Wolves game this weekend. I'm going to have to try and watch it in some form, whether it be in full afterwards on Spurs Play or something, because it is my wife and my 20th wedding anniversary this week. So we're going to just have a couple of days off towards the end of the week and celebrate the amazing fact that she's managed to put up with me for 20 years, which is something in itself, and she deserves to be rewarded for that. But I'll find a way to watch the game. Maybe not at the time, but maybe after. We'll see how it goes. And then so that means I'll probably do my video probably Monday next week rather than, as in the following Monday after the Wolves game, rather than the Sunday. But it will come. It will come. And I will, of course, I always say it's not quite the same when you're watching on a screen than it is being there and seeing all the little bits and pieces I'll be able to tell you in this video that I saw. But I will speak to those there, guesties in my place covering the game. I'll speak to everyone and speak to people in the club. So don't worry, I'll still give you a very full and rounded view on everything within the club in the week ahead. So yeah, right, time to head off. I think I've covered everything I could. I don't want to do a lone roundup because there's still some players playing today. But I'll try and do a little bit of a catch up on that in the next video as well. So I doubt there'll be a midweek video, unless I say doubt. It's Tottenham, anything can happen. But I'd imagine the next one will be in 7-8 days' time. So yeah, let's head off and enjoy the rest of our Sundays. I'm going to have a late one tonight. I've got Super Bowl tonight, so I'm going to be staying up very late to watch that. I'm going to be a bit of a zombie tomorrow at work, but it's going to be a cracker, I think. I'm hoping it is. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your Sundays or whatever day you're watching this. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.